My lords, we have entered peak Stellaris, and I think that with a few minor quality of life fixes, Stellaris could be perfected. What I want to talk about today is the progression from 4.0 to the current 4.3 patch. I'm very fortunate to have the community helping me out with this one. As of writing, 3,100 of you have responded to my poll, and the outcome was interesting indeed. Thank you to everyone who engaged with this. I asked the question whether or not you were enjoying patch 4.3. 39% of you were loving it, 15% were indifferent, 5% hated it, and perhaps the biggest takeaway was 42% have no opinion, and from the comments it appears that many of you haven't played it yet, potentially having been put off since the 4.0 launch. Today I'm going to discuss what I think about 4.3, I'll discuss the poll and I'll go through everyone's comments in detail later in the report, but to summarise the community feedback, people love it because late game lag is finally gone, starbases are strong again and can actually defend territory, the game has a much slower and much more tactical feel, and it fixes the broken economy of 4.0. In contrast, people dislike it because their 3 million power fleet is now 100,000, the AI in the crisis feels overpowered, people's mods are broken, or people are on console and therefore haven't had the opportunity to play it yet. Certainly the first two feel like a skill issue, but I promise we'll touch on it later. What I did want to explore was those who said that they were putting off trying it out, or hadn't been playing since 4.0. I wanted to investigate whether this reflected the active numbers of the players on Steam. So let's look at the numbers. This chart shows the active players on Steam per day. As of April, we're peaking around 21,000 active players. For some context, when Machine Age dropped, this went as high as 35,000. In my opinion, Machine Age was one of the best DLCs and one of the best patches that we've had in years. In any case, that peaked at around 35,000. Biogenesis and 4.0 peaked as high as 44,000. Perhaps suggesting that the hype for Biogenesis was much higher than that of Machine Age. The lowest point in 2024 was August at just under 18,000 players. Now that's not wildly unusual considering it's the peak of summer for the Northern Hemisphere, and we contrast this to the Biogenesis launch where we saw the peak of 44,000 and the August lows of 18,500, before another spike when Shadows of the Shroud dropped. I don't think these numbers in respect to Biogenesis and 4.0 are particularly unusual. Big DLCs always see large spikes in active players and a drop off afterwards. Perhaps the hype for Biogenesis and 4.0 was simply greater and we saw a larger influx of players than we did for Machine Age. But I would suggest that the active number of players say it's business as usual post-launch. Indeed, the final thing I'll say is given that Stellaris enters its 10th year in 2026, the population seems really healthy, and the game seems to be doing remarkably well. I guess the take home from this is that many of the people who perhaps say they hadn't tried out 4.3 yet is not necessarily reflective of the active player base. Which brings me back to the point of this report. Why do I think 4.3 has been such a good change? Well, let's talk about it. The defining change of the patch, in my eyes, is the naval rework. Now, the fundamental change here is the way that naval capacity works. The amount of naval capacity that you can access from anchorages and soldiers and so on has been nerfed, so you need more soldiers and more anchorages to get the same amount of naval capacity as you did previously. On top of that, ships account for more naval capacity. So corvettes, as an example, used to take up 1 naval cap, now they take up 5, which is obviously a huge increase. It means that in theory, not only is it more difficult to get naval cap, but you can only support 20% of the fleet that you could previously. This has the inevitable effect of meaning you have smaller numbers of ships. On top of this, ships are more expensive to build. So not only are they more expensive to build, they're also more expensive to upkeep, and the end result is fewer ships. And not just fewer ships, but fewer navies as well. To further compound this, we also saw far-reaching nerfs to the economy. Now these came in various forms. Traits were nerfed, for example, buildings were nerfed, certain things were removed, like specialization resource districts. Now, lots of these nerfs were small, but they add up over time. Indeed, if I wanted to list every single change that came in 4.3, I suspect I would be reading them out for about an hour and a half. The take-home message is that essentially numbers get smaller, economy and navy. Now, why do I think this is a good thing? Well, firstly, it means that your decisions matter that much more. If, for example, you want to build a corvette and it costs 20% of your available alloys, that corvette is that much more valuable to you than if you could build 5 for half the cost, as an example. It means that when you lose a ship in battle, it actually means something, it actually has an effect. Star bases, conversely, although they are now more expensive, also have much more value because they can hold star systems in a way that they couldn't previously. Anyone who was familiar with 4.0 knew very well that unless you had a ridiculously fortified system with several deep space citadels and perhaps even orbital rings and so on and so forth, almost any fleet could just walk in and take it. And frankly, even with all those defences, they still weren't really the bastions that you would expect them to be. Well, that's different now, purely because you can field less ships. Things like the Crisis are much harder, whereas in previous iterations of the game, 25x all was extremely achievable with almost any build. Now, if you want to be able to compete at that level, you need some of the most sweaty meta builds in the game. Now, personally, I think that's a really good thing. I think the hardest difficulties should be extremely inaccessible, because that's the nature of a difficulty curve. What's the point in having the hardest difficulty if 80% of the player base can do it? That's not good enough. That's not my expectation. I personally want the hardest difficulty to be accessible to 1% of the player base. Because of the economy changes, all of these things filter down further. The game feels much more punishing if you make bad choices, which again I think is important. You should be rewarded for making good choices and not necessarily punished, but you certainly shouldn't be able to just float on through making bad decisions. I'm a big fan of what you put into it needs to be more or less what you put out of it, and the players that can manipulate the economies and the builds and so on and so forth should be able to get the most out of it. It's one of the reasons why I've always been semi-anti-tool gameplay, because the idea that you can have 2 planets and be as strong as someone with 20 planets, it's largely ridiculous to me. It's far more difficult to successfully manage 20 planets than it is to manage 2. Therefore, the person with 20 should have a significant advantage over the person with 2. I know that that's an unpopular opinion. I know that people like their tool gameplay. That's fine. I don't mind tool gameplay being a thing, but I don't think it should be on a power level even remotely close to wide gameplay. One of the other major things that has changed in 4.3 is the deletion of bypass weapons. When I say bypass weapons, I'm largely talking about disruptors. Disruptors have been one of the best weapons in the game for years, potentially since the neutron change way back in 2022, I believe. Well, now we have passive shield hardening and armor hardening on the regular components, and disruptors got nerfed anyway. They've really fallen out of use, and it's very difficult to think of a reason why you would want to use them at all. You would have to have some serious hull to armor to shield ratios for them to be worth it, and there's nothing I can think of that does. Focused arc emitters, on the other hand, FAEs, they are still viable. I've done the math and compared them to a Giga Cannon, and if it's a battleship fighting a battleship, generally you're still better off in using a focused arc emitter. The other weapons, well, they're a little bit up in the air. I've seen some chat about autocannons and plasma. I've never been a fan of kinetics. I personally don't rate them at all. For a start, they miss 25% of the time. That's not a good shout. I'm a big missile guy. Whether or not that will change, I'm not too sure. But I am absolutely not going to put autocannons and plasma on my battleships. I think that is a big mistake. In any case, it's nice that we can have those conversations, and it's nice that there's not a clear and obvious answer, because it is more of a rock, paper, scissors type scenario. And that's important because battleships, as an example, are so much more valuable than they were before. No longer will you have 25 fleets of 50 battleships. You might have 10 fleets of 10 battleships. And if one of those fleets dies, well, that's going to be more or less 70,000 alloys to rebuild those 10 ships. Hopefully that gives you a reflection on how I feel and why I feel the 4.3 changes are really good. But something I didn't mention, which I frankly should have, is the whole goal of these changes was to reduce lag. Ever since the 4.0 pop changes, the goal was to reduce lag, and finally we're at a place where it worked. I remember when I played a game post 4.0, I fought Satana on 25x all. I lost to Satana, but I wasn't particularly bothered by the fact I lost. The final battle with Satana, I had roughly 14,000 naval cap, most of which would have been riddle escorts, frigates, some cruisers and battleships. The fight itself took about 15 minutes because the lag at that point was so slow, it just wasn't going anywhere. Now we actually have a game that works post 2400, post 2450. I mean, isn't that the point at the end of the day? For me, it's a huge bonus. At the start, I mentioned Stellaris is potentially perfect. As you've heard my thoughts, I certainly think it's much better than 4.0. I would, however, make a few minor changes to get it over the line. The first thing is a star-based template. Now, I appreciate many of you will think, oh, I want to be able to design my starbase. I would love to be able to design a starbase, but I'm not even asking for that. All I'm asking for is an auto template that builds it into an anchorage, a shipyard, a trading post, or a bastion. Because how often do you have 20 starbases a game and you build 18 anchorages and they're all exactly the same and you have to build the same thing 18 times and it drives me crazy. I wish that there was an option where I could just say I want this to be an anchorage and it just auto upgrades as long as I had the alloys. That would be incredible. The next quality of life thing I'd really like to see would be a resettle all button. For anyone who does widespread galactic invasions and you conquer planets, you have to move 10,000 pops from one planet to another if you don't want that planet. I do this all the time, or if you're sending population to the lathe, you have to click the button hundreds of times. It became so frustrating, I downloaded an auto clicker to click the button for me because I didn't want to ruin my finger by clicking that quickly. Please just give us a resettle all button so I don't have to click that 1,000 times. Two more things that I think would make the game better, this one will be unpopular I think, would be a Deep Space Citadel limit or a cap. Deep Space Citadels I don't personally enjoy. I find that the AI, a bit like they used to do with habitats, spams them everywhere. The UI is very poor, so 9 times out of 10 you'll be moving from System A to System B to System C, and the DSC won't necessarily engage with your fleet. So the trailing army then gets caught by it and you lose your trailing army because there's this DSC there, which in reality offers no real threat. It might only have a 5k fleet power and you've got hundreds of thousands of fleet power. It just didn't get engaged, or maybe it did get engaged and then it just magically came back to life. I really struggle with DSCs. I think that they should be tied to starbase cap, and maybe you should only be able to build 5 total, or not many more than 5 total. I think they're a pain. Similarly, but for different reasons, I think that orbitable rings should also be capped. Currently, there's no reason not to build a ring on every single planet. So if I have 30 planets, I have to build a ring on every single planet because it's sort of non-optimal to do so. I personally don't think that's good. I think, again, they should be capped and you should be able to make a decision. Okay, this is my best planet, maybe this one needs a ring, and all this rural world, well, this doesn't need a ring because it doesn't make sense, whatever it might be. I would like to see caps on those as well. Again, I appreciate that might not necessarily be a popular one, but it's something that I would personally like to see, and I think it would make the micro a little bit better. Although certainly of all those 4 things, ring caps would be right at the bottom. Starbase templates, DSC limits, and resettle all buttons, that would be glorious. But I've talked enough. Let's look at the poll and address your comments. The top comment is Cries in Console Edition. I'm sorry, Dlugo09. I'm sure you'll get it someday. Do you know what? As sad as it must be for console players, at least you get releases where the bugs have all been fixed and the balancing has already been done, right? And also, my understanding is that you get DLCs in massive lumps rather than one after another. So, swings and roundabouts. Say no to Haddon Field 9828. The game will never run perfectly, but this new performance is really impressive. I couldn't agree more. The game runs so much better. I mean, I'd say measurably better. Of course it's measurably better. They've done graphs and things, but it's fantastic. Cyrilon, sorry if I'm butchering your names. I'm still waiting for all my essential mods to update, but I'm doing power creep is what I wanted for a long time. Do you know, I've barely touched on power creep. Power creep is something that is almost inevitable with the way a DLC model works. There's always going to be some new, shiny, exciting thing that generally, for certain players, will be really important in a DLC. And maybe is the reason some people buy DLCs, because it has this new shiny thing that's really powerful that you didn't have before. The bad thing about that is you get this inevitable power creep, and that makes older things redundant. A fantastic example is megastructures. In 4.0 with support districts, you could easily get a regular old planet pumping out 2,000-3,000 energy credits a month. What does that mean for the Dyson sphere that we got way back in Utopia that does 3,000 energy credits? Is it even worth putting 40,000 alloys into it when you can just do it with a planet, and you can have as many planets as you like, remember? So I completely agree. I think bringing the power creep down, super important for the health of the game. Dragmire the Warlock. Some of the origins need to be reworked with the new early game economy. For example, Knights of the Toxic God starts you off with a heavy deficit of alloys, which cripples early expansion. Let's see what the comments say. To be fair, there are ways around it. I tend to agree with the top comments. I don't think all origins should be equal. I do think some should be harder than others. I don't know how much of a heavy deficit of alloys this is. I suspect there are ways around it. Indeed, I've seen players in the Stellaris Discord, particularly with Knights, doing absolutely insane builds. 25,000 research by 2,300. So of Knights, I think it's probably fine. Zanderman668. As a small mod creator, I don't like new updates for an obvious reason. No, I don't have time to update all my mods. I got a job, I got a life. Well, look, you don't have to update your mods all the time. It's a choice. I appreciate that might be frustrating for you, but I don't think they can halt the expansion of a game because people make mods for it. Werebear Games. Only change I've come across is less numbers in fleet. Otherwise, my economy is still 100, 200 on almost everything, with 1k tech by 2250. Yeah, I mean, do you know what? I'd more or less agree. The economy changes I don't feel like have hit me particularly hard, other than the naval cap changes, where I'm finding I need 1, 2, or 3 worlds dedicated to fortresses and soldiers to get the naval cap to a point where I need it to be. I'm not seeing massive changes in that regard, although I appreciate that they are there. Phoenix 1 Leader. The nerfing of resource gathering makes getting situated early on take a lot longer, though the fact that fleets are stronger on individuals levels does surprisingly work now, even though your fleet levels will take decades if not centuries to get up to the 100k that we've been used to. They're basically saying it how it is. Your fleet numbers are smaller and your economy is smaller, but it doesn't seem like that's really a negative or a positive. Kaleidoscope Crew with the fantastic surprised Pikachu. I haven't touched it yet, but I'm glad to hear people are loving it. Me too. Lunatic Crusader. I got the DLC I was missing, changed some things in my go-to empire, and experienced limitless pain and suffering from void worms and leviathans destroying my pacifist fleets. That's something I've not touched on at all. This is my personal preference. I love that void worms and leviathans are strong and can ruin your empire. But less so void worms, because that's more of them engaging on you. But leviathans should be strong. The elder dragon should take 2 or 3 fleets with dark matter tech to be able to destroy them. Void worms is a slightly different issue because they can come and they can kill you, and I've seen some people struggling with them. Personally, I like the challenge. I think it's a good thing. I get why that could be frustrating. Blue. The early and mid-game performance is much better compared to before that the fastest speed is too fast. Never thought I'd say that. Do you know, that's a really good shout. Maybe I'm just getting old, but I also just play on the second fast rather than fastest. And even sometimes at war, I slow it all the way down. Bad Piggies. I think I'm getting the hang of it, though I did install a quality of life mod that brings back rural district support, but less busted. Is it less busted? And another that makes a good compromise between the tiny spawnable ships and the big ones. It sounds like you've just reversed the changes, to be honest. It sounds like you just reversed the changes. Bizmaster the Slav. I like it with a small caveat. I will still tinker with the Define to reduce the empire size to 4.2 levels, as I enjoy a wide playstyle. I find that people really tie themselves in knots over empire size. And yeah, of course, it has some of an effect, but you can outscale that effect. As long as you're making good planets, it's... the final thing I'd say about empire size, and again, this is potentially an unpopular opinion, I wouldn't mind if they just removed empire size completely, but I understand why it's there. At Gambino Bolognese, possibly starbases are too powerful still in my game. They have effectively enforced galactic peace. See, I disagree with that. I think if starbases are too powerful, use some cloaked frigates. Get around it, use some cruisers with torpedoes. Starbases are not invincible by any means at all. They're just more than speed bumps now. You actually have to commit a large force to take one. I don't think that's necessarily an issue, and it certainly doesn't prevent you from taking it. It's just, it requires some thought. Mishi Man Mayhem says, honestly, personally, I like it. Before having a dry fortress of starbases was pretty easy to get past. I completely agree. Actually, a fortress in the stars. Yeah, so, and look, ironically, Michi Man Mayhem has the same likes. So yeah, I would agree with Michi's take rather than Gambino's. Oh, Cook. I like it because I'm not waiting 3 seconds for a single day. I completely agree. Bobby Flynn, I think cruisers and battleships are a bit too large, but I'm loving it. I mean, they can always tweak it in the future. I think it's more or less right. I think if anything needs tweaking, it's the amount of naval cap that you get from anchorages and soldiers. I think they could probably tweak it for anchorages and soldiers to give you a bit more naval cap, so that, for example, a starbase doesn't just give you one battleship. But I think let's let them cook. Oops, oh, Hellfire. It feels amazing so far. The AI are not too sharp, but the team said that should be updated next. I suspect the AI will get better as the updates come out. They'll have to learn how to teach them how to play it again. Jace Morley, definitely good, even if I miss the feel of large fleets. I think ultimately that system will need rewrite to be scalable. I do think it's a shame they couldn't keep the changes from merging pop factions. I liked that it meant I actually had to pay attention to them, even if it needs tweaking and bug fixing. I'm not 100% what Jace is referring to with merging pop factions there. I mean, factions, dare I say, internal politics probably needs looking at anyway. Ian says he hasn't played it yet, but he's hoping he'll love it. Well, I hope you do as well, Ian. Tom Nom Nom. I like the sounds of the changes. Haven't gotten around to playing it yet. Well, that's fine. I hope you enjoy it. Gamer Sunday. This feels like a massive buff to the Crisis Pass, like Behemoth Fury feels objectively overpowered now. Maybe it should. Maybe Behemoth Fury should feel overpowered. Maybe the Crisis Path should be powerful. The Crisis Paths, I think, are really difficult for them to balance because on one hand, they want them to feel, you know, in Behemoth's case, you're becoming a space dragon the size of a solar system. It should feel pretty powerful. I mean, with Cosmogenesis, you're learning how to rewrite reality. It should feel pretty powerful. But then I guess they have to tone it down into a world in which it's an option you can pick in a game, and, you know, it's a difficult one. Riser, I'm still iffy about the naval changes. I genuinely don't mind the economy rework, but needing several anchorages for a single battleship is just obnoxious. I think I'd like it more if ship size was cut in half so I could have more than 15 battleships without having a trillion starbases dedicated to anchorages. I don't disagree with you there, Riser. I think the overarching naval changes, really good. I think the amount of naval cap that we get from anchorages in particular isn't that great. And I do agree with you, you're investing a lot of anchorages into just supporting one battleship. Caesar the Random. At first I thought the economy would be impossible to deal with. After playing for a bit it just takes longer, but snowballing is still really easy. I agree with you. Kyle. Want to get up to date with the DLCs? Well, Kyle, you absolutely should, and you should do me a favour and use my Paradox Store link, as I will get a kickback. Bow and Arrow. Big fan of the new ship naval capacity reworks. I am pleased to hear it, Bow and Arrow. Kismet the Dragon. I've not been able to play, unfortunately, but the changes to the FE Buildings Genesis guides and the overtuned hit me hard. Well, I mean, everyone's in the same boat, I would say, Kismet, so give it a go and see what you think. Dit Marvin Bell. Wow, this comment has a lot of likes. This poll really missed a fifth option. Don't know, haven't touched it since 4.x. Absolutely busted release. Yeah, okay, so this is where I sort of got the thought that maybe a lot of people had played 4.0 and then not come back. And that's the impression I got from looking at the poll, as you can see, with sort of 42% of you saying that you hadn't played it yet, more or less. Johnny Hampton, trying to figure it all out. I feel like when I got a good grasp on things, it changes. I also think it makes early fauna mobs much more dangerous. That's a really good point, actually, Johnny. It does. I've seen a couple of screenshots from the Stellaris Discord where people have been trapped by mining drones. Now, I think it's quite funny because, with no disrespect to some of the players who are posting these screenshots, they're obviously quite new at the game and they come across a mining fleet with sort of 1 or 2k, and it might be 2250 and they can't deal with it and they're trapped. And I sort of see that as quite funny. I imagine that would be quite frustrating if you were that player. But at least it presents a challenge that you can overcome, because you can say, okay, well, you know, we can see that this fleet is 1,000. Let's build up our corvettes and go and deal with it. Rossford just finished a big campaign as 4.3 launch, so I'm a bit Stellaris out, but I'm looking forward to coming back to hear it. Maddie the Pancake, I'm a lot worse at it than I was at 4.0, but I'm sure I'll get used to it eventually. Maddie, I suspect it's just the numbers are smaller. You're still the same player, you'll still have the same knowledge, and you'll get used to just figuring it all out again. Dawn Striker, new performance is fantastic. I enjoy the slower pace of games. I think the only reason I'm not over the moon is I think Civics and Origins could maybe use another pass. You're almost certainly right. I am happy to live in a world where all Origins are not equal, but I'm sure that certainly some of the Civics could use a pass. Breakdown says, I wouldn't say I love it, but generally it's more fun than the previous edition. Well, that's certainly positive. Kuba says, I'm kind of sad they didn't go with ship tiers. My 3.2 mil X carrier Doomstack could use a little downsizing. Ship tiers was really interesting, and don't remember being particularly enamoured when Eladrin presented the ship tiers. I thought it looked super overly complicated, but of course we never actually got to play with it and sort of see how it would go. Equally, I think it is completely reasonable that a Corvette you build in 2200 is not going to be anywhere near the same as a Corvette you build in 2400, given the level of tech and so on and so forth. Different ship tiers or different hull types, I don't think would be the worst thing in the world. How they could implement it, I'm not sure. Jonas says, I tried the new ship sizes, didn't like it, and went back to before. I wonder why you didn't like it. Philip Matteson, love it, but the multiplayer is in a dire state. I haven't talked about multiplayer yet. My understanding, and this is not my experience, I've asked around the multiplayer community, is that 4.3 is levels ahead of where 4.0 was on multiplayer. It's not perfect, but it's certainly much better than it was. The anecdotal sort of messages I'm getting is that for the first 100 years you might have maybe 1 or 2 desyncs tops, and then they progressively get worse over time, whereas previously you might get sort of 10 or so desyncs after 2250 in 4.0. So my understanding is multiplayer is better, but not perfect by any means. Ziggy the Assassin is busy with college. Well, all the best with your college. I hope it's going well. Lord Gong, haven't played since 4.0. Well, I would recommend you give it a go. Nicator42, I rolled back to 3.14 after 4.0 was buggy and unbalanced. If 4.3 finally fixed it, maybe I'll jump in. Nicator, I think you are not alone in that situation. 4.0 certainly wasn't the best Stellaris experience. I think 4.3 has made it much better. Basic Geoduck. I haven't liked Vanilla Stellaris for a long time. I can't stand how much it's turned into micromanaged hell, but I still played modded a lot. Yeah, fair enough. I personally don't see that modded, maybe I'm using the wrong mods. I don't feel like modded changes the fundamentals of the game very much. 9 times out of 10, it's just numbers are bigger. But like I said, that may just be the mods that I'm using. Like Kayla, I think they over-nerfed Bioascension, making the values less was enough. They didn't have to make it so slow. That's interesting. That's something I've not necessarily touched on. So most of the Ascensions now take a decade or so to complete. And because Unity's nerfed, they take a while longer to get there as well. I would suggest the nerf to Bioascension being perhaps a little bit overzealous is something I've heard before. I mean, Psionic Ascension seems to me to be by far and away the strongest. So maybe that needs a little balance. Ronin, I got hunted down by 100k of wild void worms with only my baby fleet of 10k. Is this appropriate time to say skill issue? I'm not sure. 100k of void worms sounds to me like you had the crisis on 25x, and that can be brutal, as it should be brutal. Ferris, I've been out the loop for a while. I'd love a video on 4.3. Well, that is what you're getting, sir. I loved a lot of 4.0, but fell into other games while waiting for Eladrin and the team to work out the kinks. Did they get Wilderness and Necrophage working again properly? As far as I'm aware, both Wilderness and Necrophage are working fine now. I think it was quite early on into 4.0 they were broken. I think they got fixed relatively quickly. Certainly Necrophage, actually, because I played a Chosen One vampire. I forget what the name of the vampire civic is. Entropy Drinkers. That was it, Entropy Drinkers. And boy, what a build that was. You pick the Instrument as Desire as your favored patron. Mind-bogglingly strong. Bazal, I really love how powerful megastructures and UQ Monopoly are this patch. Fully agree with you. That is one of the best things about this patch, is that megastructures and ECUs, they mean more. They're more important. Whereas the comment underneath says that they hate it. The duality of man. Master Blaster, nerf Cybernetic Ascension and Psionic play starts. Overtune got nerfed, but the other origins that can ascend early are now an issue. I think Virtual needs a massive overhaul because going Behemoth path with taking Virtual on Ocean Paradise start is broken. You can get 13 million fleet by 2250 and that kills the game experience. There's always going to be really overpowered builds, and it's a bit like a game of whack-a-mole, I suspect, for the developers, where they nerf one thing and then something else will become super powerful and then they nerf it and the cycle continues. And obviously every time a DLC comes out, it adds more and more combinations to what players can do. If that kills the game experience for you, my suggestion would be don't use it. Yeah, I mean, obviously if it's multiplayer, you can ban it as a group. And if it's single player, you can choose not to do it. But I appreciate it should not necessarily be a thing, and the developers should nerf it when they get the opportunity. Raid Sylar. To me, it's definitely better, but the AI is now even weaker, and the ultimate limit of 9999 naval cap is not good because it's simply not enough to defeat the 25x Crisis or the Fallen Empire without pushing specific meta design because you are one-shotted. I strongly disagree with you. And like I said at the start of the video, I think that if you want to play the game at 25x, you should have to use the sort of top 1% to be able to do that. And it shouldn't be accessible to every single Empire type or Empire player or whatever it might be. It should be really difficult. It should be the ultimate challenge in the game. If you want to roleplay as the UNE and you're just an average player, you don't have to play on 25x. You can play on 5x or 10x, and that's fine. I don't think 25x all should be accessible to every Empire build and every player. It should be a difficulty curve. On that particular point, I don't know if that's a popular one or an unpopular one. I'd be interested to hear general feedback about that. Florida Boy on YouTube. The far fewer ships in the early game kind of sucks and is a little unrealistic, but I understand why they did it. Is it unrealistic? I don't know that it is unrealistic. That's an interesting theme to explore. What is realistic for a spacefaring civilization? Kessa, come on Paradox, give me the harder things to do. Oh hell yeah, it seems like they're really positive. Starry Night, my only complaint is they lowered ship count. I like having absolutely massive fleets, especially Corvette spam. You can still have that, it's just less. And I mean, you can still spam Corvettes relative to other empires. Max Shadow, my review is mixed. On one hand, the game is smoother than before. Starbase is not punching bags and can actually hold their ground. Economy changes are a bit more annoying. Land invasions are faster, and this is a great thing. What they forgot, however, is they did not scale the crises with the players and the NPC nerfs. I'm around 2350, my fleets are combined 100k, and it's the strongest on the map. But if some Fallen Empire awakened, they'll still have 900k fleets and 500k fortresses. What am I supposed to do about that? You're supposed to get good, man. You're supposed to build more fleets. The Fallen Empires are supposed to be really challenging. You're still 50 years before default endgame. You have 50 years to prepare for it. Take more planets, build more stuff. That's the answer. Do you want the Fallen Empire to just roll over and die? Do you want it to be a challenge? That's my response to that. Wow, that was a lot of comments to get through. I think generally the vibe from this is positive. I certainly think it's positive. I think that the two biggest negatives are the mod issue, and the mod issue, you can't do anything about the mod issue. They're going to update the game. If you don't want to update your game, that's fine. Obviously the console thing, the console edition will come, and it's something that you should look forward to. The final issue, which is probably the main issue that the patch actually set out to address, is the numbers aren't as big as they were before issue, or the I'm struggling with Crisis or I'm struggling with Fallen Empire. I personally think that is a really good thing. Remember, you can always turn the difficulty down. You don't have to play on Grand Admiral 25x all. The difficulty curve is there for a reason. Whatever the middle difficulty is, I think it's Commodore perhaps, that, you know, that should be accessible to 50% of the player base. And that's fine. I don't think Stellaris has to be this sort of game where Grand Admiral 25x all is doable by every single player with every single build. So I'm really, really happy that these changes have come in. I really appreciate the 119 of you who responded to this poll, and I hope that you enjoyed me addressing your comments. I will do more things like this in the future if you enjoyed it. So if you did enjoy it, I'll say the YouTuber stuff, do the likes and the comments and things, because obviously I don't always make these kind of videos. And if no one watches it, then I won't do it again. But if you do watch it and you like it, then I will do it again. I think I've been talking for far too long. So have a wonderful day.